Did that entice anyone else here today? Yeah, that's actually something I'm really excited to talk about, but that is also a real challenge for me. Because when you think you already know what something means, and you said, like, I know what it means to me, then it can be really tough to think about it any differently. Have any of you ever done any renovations in your house? Like, okay, so my first home living with my spouse was in her grandmother's home. She had been put into some long-term care facility, and so we moved into the house to help take care of it and do some upgrades to it. And so we decided we were going to paint some of the house. Anyone see where this is going already? Yeah, so there was wallpaper. Okay, so if I want to paint the house, I want to make some improvements or some upgrades, what am I going to need to do prior to breaking out the can of paint? Okay, why do I have to take the wallpaper off? Can't I just paint over the wallpaper? I could, it doesn't work very well, right? That's the problem, is when you try to take something that's already well established and then just slap something else on top of it, it often doesn't stick or doesn't look good, it just doesn't work. And what I've found is oftentimes people's attempts to engage in forgiveness is not something they can just slap paint onto, because the way they make sense of forgiveness is already 7 layers of wallpaper deep. Yeah, that's how many layers I had to take off of my grandma's house. 7 layers. It was this thick in parts of it, right? And I'm scraping at it. I'm like, another layer. Oh, there's another layer. I had to get like a steam cleaner out at some spots to just like loosen up all the gum, gluey stuff that was holding it. Wow. It was a lot more work to do. And unfortunately, some of the work that people have to do in forgiveness starts with scraping off 7 layers of wallpaper in terms of what they already think or believe about it. And that wallpaper or those beliefs block people from even being able to consider forgiveness as an option. I ask people oftentimes, like, if you know forgiveness is something that you want to do, raise your hand if you would agree with any of these statements. Forgiveness is something you want to do. Forgiveness is something you think you should do. Forgiveness is something you feel like you're required to do. That it's worse if you don't do it than what happened to you. Yeah, there's layers of wallpaper here, isn't there? Yeah, and those beliefs about what forgiveness is actually creating a block, so a lot of people cannot move past the pain that they've hurt, right? Forgiveness is an option for people to deal with some of the pain that happens from living life among other human beings who are imperfect and do harm. And in fact, oftentimes the place where the most harm is done is where? Where have you felt most hurt, most betrayed? People closest to you. We're not talking about strangers most times. This happens too, right? Strangers can dehumanize us, can be unjust and cause us harm. But oftentimes the place it's occurring is in the relationships that matter most to us, the people that are closest to us. Do they even need to intend to have done us harm for it to do harm? Yeah, have you ever found out somebody's been holding a grudge against you that you had no idea that you had done anything to them? That it's a surprise to you that you've caused harm? You don't have to intend to do it. And this is something everybody has to deal with. I think Hemingway said it really well, that the world breaks everybody. Everybody. Some grow strong in the broken places, right? But if we're going to be in relationships and we're going to care and if we're going to be exposed to other human beings in the world, eventually we are going to have injustice or dehumanization done to us. And what that leaves is harm. And oftentimes strong emotions that people don't know what to do with. Because they've been hurt, and now they continue forward with that hurt, sometimes indefinitely, because they don't know what to do with it. Now, I saw that you raised your hands about a lot of things that you believe about forgiving. So I'm guessing some of your clients, for example, also believe that they want to forgive, that they should forgive, that they're even required to forgive, but yet they aren't. Why not?
How long do you have?
I've got, I think, you're my timekeeper, right?
Point well taken.
I can guess at a few of the things, and I just want all of you to consider for a moment, is there any grudge that you are currently holding? Right? Is there anyone or anything that perhaps you still feel some strong emotions around? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have felt them every day or that it's constantly on your mind. In fact, you might have done a lot of work to bury it so deep that you try not to think about it at all. But what would happen if you rounded the corner in the grocery store at 10 o'clock at night, you're tired after a long day and you just need to get some cereal, and there they are 2 feet in front of you? How many of you would still have those emotions rush right back? I'm curious, how many of you have a name that you would never consider naming your children? Oh, okay. Jerry, right? Newman. Like there's oftentimes, right, not actively, we're not always actively aware of it, but if that name gets brought up or you run into them, or how many of you, if you hear a certain song on the radio, or you smell a certain scent, or maybe you pass by that certain brand of vehicle and color. Yeah, and maybe you're even actively avoiding parts of town so that you don't run into them. Yeah, that suggests that there are still strong emotions there that aren't resolved, that might be buried really deeply, but that haven't gone anywhere. And they are capable of resurfacing in any moment. And if you've got clients, I'm suspecting that is causing issues for them in their life. I'm guessing both personally and relationally. And when we're holding those grudges, even though we may want to forgive, think we should forgive, think we're required to forgive, we might not know how. And if you think about your own grudges that you might have right now, can you think of the reasons why you can't forgive? Why you shouldn't forgive? Why you just won't plain forgive? Yeah.
Because it was so horrible.
Yeah, they were horrible.
Hurts, and maybe it still affects your kids.
Yep.
Everyday life, because they might do suicide or whatever because
Yeah.
about that. That's hard.
Yeah.
And I mean, all what you can do is like, what I do is like, Heavenly Father, I cannot forgive it yet, but I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit
So
more
when you
time.
think about I'm trying to, but I can't yet, what's the I can't yet? What's the barrier? What's the thing that's making it difficult to forgive?
The hurt to see what my kids went through just because of one person who ruined their life.
Mm-hmm. And how many of you won't forgive or don't want to forgive because the person doesn't feel sorry for what they've done? Just by raise a hand. I'm just going to go over a couple of things. Just raise your hand if this is a block or a challenge for you in forgiving. The other person has not asked for forgiveness. They haven't changed their behavior. They don't deserve it. You don't want to condone it. You don't want to let them off the hook. You can't forget what they did. You don't want to open yourself back up to what was harmed. You don't want to have a relationship with them. Have I said anything yet that has touched on at least one of the layers of, of wallpaper that you might have around this? Yeah. Yeah. They're not alive, so I can't tell them, I can't forgive them. They're not around anymore. They're dead, or who's got somebody that you don't know where in the world they are anymore. You don't know whether they're alive or dead. These are all reasons why people have found that they can't forgive or won't forgive. And each one of those reasons reveals something about what we think forgiveness is. Yeah, so there's no penitence whatsoever. They don't think they did anything wrong. In fact, in some situations, they think you're the one that ought to say that you're sorry. So how do you forgive somebody who's not sorry, who hasn't changed? So each one of these reasons reveals something about what we believe forgiveness is. And when I say forgiveness is not what you think it is because the truth is what we think about forgiveness is not necessarily accurate to what it is. There are myths and misconceptions around it. And they make sense. They are reasonable and logical misconceptions, but they create a block so that we cannot forgive people. We don't know how to do it. Yeah.
I thought that's not
Yeah.
going to happen.
That reveals a belief about forgiveness. The belief which is, I cannot forgive unless somebody is sorry. And in some situations, they're not going to be sorry. Right? Another misconception, a belief that can be revealed, I can't forgive because I can't forget what happened. We're human beings, and we literally have to do incredible cognitive gymnastics to try and forget about things that happen to us like that, right? That have strong emotions to it. Like you almost have to make yourself mentally ill. By definition, to like turn that off and just wipe it from your memories is a type of compartmentalization that is like mental illness. And also, maybe it would be unwise to forget because you learn something from it, right? Yeah. Yeah. I can't forgive because they're still engaging in the same behavior. They're still doing the same harm. And what does that reveal about what we believe about forgiveness? They have to change first, right? I can't forgive if they're still doing the same thing that's wrong. Can you see how if you think forgiveness is about what it does for the other person, I absolve you of what you did, why I wouldn't want to forgive in some situations? Why would I forgive somebody that just keeps doing the same thing wrong over and over again, right? And if I believe that forgiveness is for them, I'm not going to have access to that. So it might be helpful to provide some context for why I think there is so much misunderstanding around forgiveness. Okay? One is because of the word. So the word forgiveness, you came in thinking you know exactly what that means, right? Yeah, to you. When you think of forgiveness, what is it usually attached to? How many of you have forgiveness attached to your faith tradition? Yeah, forgiveness is incredibly important in a lot of faith traditions, especially Abrahamic faith traditions, right? So oftentimes people's understanding of forgiveness is based on those faith traditions and how forgiveness gets talked about and understood. Now, when you think of forgiveness from a faith tradition, can you describe what you're thinking about and what that is? What is forgiveness in your faith tradition? Why is it important? What does it relate to? What's that? Repentance. An idea of repentance. So repentance or forgiveness, these things are tied. So it's about a relationship between a higher power and an earthly child or a being that is connected to that higher power, right? And if you do things wrong, you have to repent, and you're looking for forgiveness from that higher power. How many of you have your first understandings of forgiveness related to that type of process? Okay, yeah. So let's think about what is required in that process. Okay, you mentioned an idea of repentance. Penitence is an idea, I think, that exists in a lot of different faith traditions. So what does it mean to be penitent? Sorry. I'm sorry. I have a recognition and an awareness that I did something that somehow fell out of alignment with what? With how I should be, with a commandment. Something has been broken there, right? I did something that was out of line with that, and I have to recognize that and be sorry for that. Good. What else? So there might need to be a punishment, and in some faith traditions, it's like there's got to be some sort of justice. So who pays for that? There are saviors. There are all sorts of different ways that we look at. I might need to sacrifice a goat, or like there are different ways that we look at, but justice has to be served, right? Good. What else? How many of your faith traditions you have to do, like, say something? You've got to confess, right? That might be confessing to some sort of human representative or our higher power, but we've got to confess and say something, right? And who does it benefit? Benefits me, the person who did wrong. It benefits me. And does my higher power remember that I did something wrong and hold it against me? No? The higher power forgets about that? That's nice. I like it. This sounds nice, doesn't it? Yeah. This is great. So we're using the same word to talk about what's happening between two people where one has done wrong, as we are talking about the relationship between a human and their higher power. And everything we believe about this and understand, perhaps correctly, to our faith tradition creates a potential barrier to this, because this word forgiveness is not the same as this one. This one, who's it for? The person who did harm, right? And as you said, is forgiveness for the person who did harm? No. Like, forgiveness is for me. Forgiveness is being able to transform those emotions that I have, that hurt, that anger, that bitterness, that betrayal. I'm able to transform that into feelings of beneficence, positive feelings towards the one who harmed me. Is that for them? Does it do anything for them? No, it's not for them. It's for me. But you can see how that misunderstanding gets created, because I was the one who did wrong over here. It was for me. So why wouldn't I think over here that it's for the person who did wrong? Over here, I have to be sorry. I have to recognize what I did. Do you have to do that over here? No, you don't. The other person doesn't have to apologize. It helps. It helps a lot when they're sorry, right? I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
Yeah, it just helps if they are.
It totally helps, doesn't it? Like when somebody, like my daughter one time, have any of you been to Brigham City? It's close by where I live in Perry. Idle Isle Chocolates. Ooh, they make this almond ball that is, oh my God. Right? It's this almond cream, and it's dipped in chocolate and then rolled in almond shavings. And they make it by like the Texas sheet-sized domes. I buy them in the handfuls. They're so good. And I got some for my birthday / Father's Day come close together. And I had them in my drawer, so that I could like enjoy them spread out over a couple of weeks. And I opened up my drawer, and all there was almond shavings at the bottom of the box. My daughter had eaten all of them. And I said to her, like, you ate all my chocolates. And she says, I know, they're just so good. I'm sorry, can you forgive me? Now that helps, doesn't it? Like if she had been like, I didn't do it, and you shouldn't have left them in there in the first place. Who do you think I am? Like, how am I supposed to resist that? Like, you should apologize to me for just like putting that type of temptation in front of me. How could I possibly have resisted, right? She didn't have to apologize, she did. And that did help how I was feeling towards her, right? Now over here, you probably aren't going to be getting forgiveness if you haven't paid for it, right? Like the justice part. You don't just get let off the hook. Over here, do I just let my daughter off the hook if she ate all my chocolates? No, I said to her, yes, I can forgive you, and you need to buy me a box of chocolates. Forgiveness is not letting the other person off the hook. Like, you can forgive someone and still believe that they should be subject to a legal process for them to do restitution or to pay for what they've done. It has nothing to do with transforming my emotions. It's not about, like, I forgive you and so you have no consequences. That's not what forgiveness is. But does it make sense why we might think that way? Because over here, we're kind of getting let off the hook. Like, I don't have to pay for that. Over here, that's not what it is. I don't just have to let them off the hook.
Like, aren't you paying?
Yeah, and maybe the I'm sorry, that's why that helps so much, right? Because you're seeing some of the work that they're doing. But it doesn't require that, right? I can choose to forgive my daughter even if she never apologizes for it. Because forgiveness is for me, and I don't want what that does to me. What is it going to do to my relationship with her if I can't forgive her? Yeah, and I want to have a relationship with her. But that is sometimes even one of the problems that we have too, because over here, forgiveness is about reconciliation, isn't it? It's about bridging the gap that may have been created by what I did, right? I'm reconciling. Over here, do you have to reconcile with someone to forgive them? Do you need to have a relationship with somebody? No. In fact, that might be incredibly unwise. Now, I want to with my daughter. I want to reconcile with her. But there are some situations people don't forgive because they're like, I don't want to have a relationship with this person. They're still doing harm, right? I don't want to open myself back up to that. You don't have to. But because of all of these misconceptions, it blocks people from even having the choice. And even if they do want to do it, they might think that it happens by saying, I forgive you. How many of you have said the words or had the words said to you, I forgive you, that didn't do anything to change your emotions, but in fact was even sometimes used as maybe a club to hit you? Oh, I forgive you. Right. And you just feel the weight hanging over your head, right? Ready to be dropped at any given moment. Forgiveness isn't a performative act. You don't have to say, I forgive you, which is great because some people are dead, right? That we need to forgive. Some people we don't have any contact with, or it wouldn't be wise to have a conversation with. So for me, it becomes really important, if we're going to make forgiveness be an option, to realize what it is and what it isn't. So I have an infographic as a reminder. It's not pulling up. It's okay. It's going to get sent out to you after this message, but it lays out what forgiveness is, what it isn't. And that for me is the first step is pulling back all those layers of wallpaper and realizing what I thought forgiveness is, it's not that thing. And that might open up the possibility for me to actually be able to heal some of those emotions, to transform those things so they don't keep sitting with me. I don't have to keep carrying them. They don't keep hurting me and my other relationships because I don't know how, or I don't think I can transform them. So forgiveness is not for them, it's for me. It's not condoning behavior. It's not reconciling. It's not saying the words, right? And as we pull back all those layers of wallpaper, are any of you starting to realize that maybe you don't know then what forgiveness is exactly if it's not those things? How do you do it if it's not saying the words? I see a grimace. Don't. Okay, oh, it's a smile. Okay, your grimace is not. I'm sorry, your smile is not a grimace. I was reading something else into that. Anybody maybe struggling right now to think about like what exactly forgiveness is if it's not those things?
We've all got it down now.
You got it down?
It all makes sense.
Okay. I often find that once you pull back the wallpaper, sometimes people are just left with a blank wall that they don't know what to do with. They're not even sure how to paint it, right? So forgiveness is a process. It's a process of transforming those emotions of hurt, anger, bitterness, betrayal into feelings of beneficence. And there are stages that we go through. Now, this is not the only way to understand it, but I prefer to use Robert Enright's phase model of forgiveness. It's got 4 distinct phases. This is going to be part of the infographic that I send to you. But I want to walk you through what those 4 stages are so that you can see what the process looks like for you or for somebody else that you might be trying to help walk through it. Okay? So the first phase is a really tough one for a lot of people because it involves uncovering our anger. Who already is a little uncertain about what that might look like or realizes that might be challenging for you. You don't want to keep feeling those feelings, right? Does that make sense why you buried them? Like if I am feeling these things and they don't feel good to me and I don't know what to do with them, that makes perfect sense that you would bury it. And this is what normally happens for people when they don't know what to do with the hurt and the pain and the anger and the bitterness and the shame and the guilt and all of the other emotions that happen when somebody has done injustice or dehumanized us, and we don't know what to do with those emotions. If you don't know what to do with it, it's like bury it in the ground. It's like I got this radioactive material. I don't know what to do with it. I know that it's going to cause me cancer or, ruin my yard. So let's put it under the ground so I can't see it anymore. It makes sense why we do that. And it also makes sense why it would be then hard for me to say, okay, the first step in transforming that is to unbury it. So we worry that I'm going to be dwelling on it, or I don't have the time to process these emotions or make sense of them. I got things to do. So again, it makes sense. I'm going to just push it aside. I'm going to bury it. Yeah, people have a really problematic relationship with that emotion itself. And so when you suggest unburying it, it's like, why would I unbury that emotion if it's a bad one, that it means I'm bad for feeling angry? Yeah, because one of the kind of misconceptions of holding a grudge or not forgiving is that it somehow punishes the other person or gets them to change, which is the similar kind of logic of drinking poison and hoping somebody else will die. That's sometimes how holding a grudge has been described. I'm going to drink this I'm going to hold all this anger. I'm going to drink this poison because do you know what anger held in does to your body physiologically? Research shows that it raises your blood pressure, your heart rate, and you have literal hardening of arteries around the heart. which sounds like 3 things that lead to what's the number 1 killer in the heart disease? Yeah. So, this for me is a health issue, right? This is a health issue if we're holding a grudge, hoping that it's going to somehow change people. Now, if it worked, great.
Then we could all do that.
Great. I've never seen it work. I don't think it's ever worked. And how many of us right now are holding that pain, that poison, hoping that it's going to change the world around us? And it doesn't. We sometimes misunderstand holding a grudge for having boundaries. And they are 2 very different things, right? Like the reason why we experience naturally, everybody experiences, you naturally feel angry when you're dehumanized or hurt, is because anger is an incredibly energy-filled emotion. How many of you have ever tried to work out angry? And you're like, I can punch this bag and run forever, right? Because there is so much energy in anger. In fact, if you see people who are just sitting and they get angry, like their muscles start to tense, their hands clench, it fills the body with energy. What's that energy for? To respond to dehumanization and injustice, to set boundaries, to protect, to defend, right? That's what that energy is there for. And if we're just burying it because we think anger is bad and it just turns into violence, anger doesn't have to be violent. Any of you ever heard of the acronym MAD? Mothers Against Drunk Driving? I love that acronym because it's literally a type of anger, right? Did they take the anger and use it towards vengeance or revenge, or did they hold it in? No, they created an organization that has helped to save lives and to heal people because they took the energy of that anger and they did something, they built something with it that helps protect or helps change things from how they are now. And that's what anger is trying to give us. We need the anger sometimes to set healthy boundaries. And if we misunderstand those 2 things from each other, then I'm holding on to the anger, which is just hurting me. It's not actually changing the other person. And I don't feel like I can forgive because I think that's just going to give the other person access to me again. Nope, you don't have to reconcile. You don't have to reconcile. Yeah. When Abraham is dehumanized, or any of us are dehumanized, right? Forgiveness is about what it will do for me, for Abraham, right? It's about being able to transform those emotions that I felt that will just stay with me indefinitely until they are dealt with, right? And he's able to not be around his father or have any contact, but not be carrying those emotions with him. Thank you. Yeah. So where I would push back is I have to leave a good place. I wonder sometimes if we're really in a good place while we've got all that anger buried. Because it does appear to be the best that we could hope for in that situation, right? But how is that anger impacting us, like blood pressure, or impacting our relationships, or turning into something referred to as horizontal violence? Any of you ever heard that term before, horizontal violence? Like when you don't know how to deal with injustices and you don't know how to take care of that, what often happens is it leaks out sideways onto the people around them. You ever heard of a dog getting kicked? People kicking their dogs? How do you kick a dog? Right? Like that's the dog is like loyal to all ends and that kind of thing, right? You bought the dog because you love the dog. How do you end up kicking the dog? Yeah, think about the situations in which, if we don't know how to deal with what's going on at work, I don't know how to deal with the relationships with my family or friends, and now I'm taking it out on you. Exactly. I can't strike out there, so it's just going to come out sideways where I feel like I can't. And so I get that sometimes we think, well, I'm in a good place, I've buried it, I've forgotten about it, but have we really forgotten about it? Let me ask you a few questions to see if potentially you've got some buried anger. Okay, these questions, if you can say yes to them, suggest that you might have something that you've pushed down. You ever heard Jeff Foxworthy? It's like his whole comedy routine is like, you might be a redneck if, right? It's like, if the color of your vehicle is primarily described as rust, you might be a redneck, right? It's like those kind of jokes. So all of these questions are like, if you can say yes to this, you might have buried anger, right? Have you ever obsessed about the offender or the offense? Have you ever found yourself ruminating, obsessing, thinking about it? Have you ever found yourself comparing your life to the offender? How are they doing? Like, what's going on? You ever find yourself comparing your life? Have you ever had an impact on your health? Loss of sleep, eating changes, right? Has it impacted your stress levels, right? Has it created a change in your behavior? Is there a part of town you won't drive through anymore to make sure that you don't do them? I've heard of roommates who completely shift their schedule so that they're never at home at the same time as their roommates anymore, right? Have we been afraid of facing our anger? Have we been afraid of facing our guilt or shame? Even though somebody did harm to us, like take, for example, a kid who gets abused. Should any kid ever feel guilty or ashamed about being the victim of abuse? Of course not. Under no circumstances. But they do, right? We often feel a sense of guilt or shame when somebody has done harm to us. And if we have avoided facing that, we might have some buried anger. Right? Was anyone able to answer yes to any of those questions? Yeah. So that buried anger, as long as it's there, it's with us and it's hurting us. And the first phase in forgiving is unburying it so that we can see it and transform it. You can't change it while it's buried underground. Because I've got to understand why that hurt. Perhaps what I need to do in response. There might be some boundaries that I need to set, right? If I just forget that my dad almost tried to sacrifice me, that might be a problem. I might need to realize, time to move out of town, right? and so I've got to have that uncovered so that I can process and deal with those emotions. Yeah. So now I need to understand what tools I have available to me to deal with emotions, any emotions. And this goes to emotional intelligence. Like I can use resources like journaling to be able to get those emotions expressed on a page. Or I might need to have a safe place or somebody that I can work with. I might even need like a forgiveness partner, somebody who can be a witness as I talk through some of the emotions that I have. That, I think, is literally some of your jobs, right? We've got some folks in here that you provide spaces for people to talk about their emotions and what they're experiencing. We don't always have to have a therapist or a... Sorry, I'm not trying to like steal clients from you or anything like that. But we do sometimes need somebody to talk to, or we need some way of managing our emotions in healthy ways, right? So there is the challenge. If we don't have those tools or resources, it's going to be challenging for me to want to uncover those emotions. But until I do that, I'm not going to be able to transform them. Yeah.
I feel like to do so.
Yeah. Time can also turn things gangrenous and your leg can fall off, right? But if you are using time to do work, to pull back wallpaper, to do emotional work, because it does take time to do that work, it's not the time itself that's healing, but what you're doing with it. And I totally agree that like there is, for many of us, this process is going to take some time. My worry is that when people bury it, they think that while it's down there and as time is passing, it's somehow healing and going away. But it's not, right? if you bring it up and you use that time to address it, that's when the healing is happening. So I have 1 minute. There are 3 phases. The second phase is choosing to forgive. We have to be able to make a choice because it takes work to do it. It's a commitment to do it. So it's important to understand what it is and what it isn't. Once we make that choice, we can get into the work. It doesn't require somebody saying sorry. They don't have to change. I can do the work to transform my emotions. I can work towards understanding. I can work on compassion. I can literally do things that shift my emotional experience of what happened. And in the 4th phase, we release ourselves from emotional prison. And we discover things like purpose, meaning, and suffering, right? That we are not alone. All of these phases are taken from Robert Enright's book, Forgiveness is a Choice. That's a resource that you can use. I'm also going to send you a little summary in the infographic.
Can you go through 1 through 4 real quick again?
Yep. Uncover your anger, choose to forgive, the work of forgiveness, and the final phase is discovery and release from emotional prison. And I have found that this is a process that has worked for me and for others. I have gone through this kind of hurt and betrayal and harm in my life, and forgiveness has allowed those emotions to be transformed. And I would hope that for you and the people that you work with. So thanks for doing some work to shave some layers of wallpaper off today. Thank you.